Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Faleh Al-Khayat. I am an Iraqi engineer who has worked 37 years in the Iraqi oil industry. I retired on my own request in March 2004. I stayed in Baghdad until June 2006 when it became unbearable and too dangerous for me and my sons to stay there. So I immigrated to Jordan and I live in Amman now. The Iraqi oil is not only the main wealth of the Iraqi people, it is their pride. Oil in Iraq was discovered in Kirkuk in 1927, 10 years before it was discovered in Saudi Arabia. And the owners, the company which had the concessions of oil all over Iraq was a foreign-owned company by the name of the Iraqi Petroleum Company. The ownership of that company was divided in 5 parts. 4 equal parts were 1 part to British Petroleum, 1 part to Shell, 1 part to ExxonMobil America, and 1 part to CFP France. Remember, these were the main victors of the First World War, and they divided it among themselves. 5% were to Caltex, which is better known as Gulbenkian. IPC discovered the oil in Iraq, it exploited it, it started a production and export from mainly the Mediterranean. Iraq was getting, for decades, only a very small amount, cash amount per barrel per oil. And in 1952, after the nationalization of oil in Iran, and then the retaking over, Iraq had what is called the equal sharing agreement with the IPC, with 50% of the profit going to the Iraqi government and 50% of the profit to the IPC. But IPC had all the control on every square meter of Iraq from the south to the north. And it followed a policy because of the radical politics of the Iraqi people, because of their leftist leaning, because of their nationalist aspiration. They concentrated on the investment in the Gulf, which was more amenable to their policies than Iraq. Because of that, and because of the aspiration of various Iraqi governments to have more money and more revenue for development, a lot of conflict arose between the Iraqi government and the IPC. In 1960, Iraq put the initiative to form the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Country, which was founded in Baghdad, to safeguard the interest of the nations which produce and export oil but don't get the benefit out of it. The conflict with the foreign companies continued until 1972 when Iraq nationalized its oil. It threw out the IPC in 1972, and end of 75 it threw out the Basra Petroleum Company, which is an affiliate of the IPC, which had the concession in the south. And the Iraqi National Oil Company took over both operation, and the Iraqi personnel, to the surprise of the world oil industry, run the oil efficiently, and they increased production and went on to actually treble the production of oil from Iraq as well as explore 3 times more in the proven reserve of the Iraqi oil by the end of the 1979 and of course 1980 when the Iran-Iraq war started. So the Iraqi personnel had the greatest pride into sustaining and increasing production, sustaining and increasing reserves, building the infrastructure of the oil industry in Iraq, which in the 70s was the best in the Middle East. A lot of damage happened to oil installations during the Iran-Iraq war because most of our southern installations are adjacent to the Iranian border and they were subjected to bombardment. When the war ended in 1988, Iraq was only producing a fraction of what its capacity. But by the end of 1989, it recovered again through the efforts of its national staff to achieve an equal share to Iran at the time, and actually our production before the invasion of Kuwait was 3.1 million barrels per day, which is the highest since 1979, and 3 times the level which were achieved during the foreign control of our oil. Under the embargo, the 1991 war caused fantastic damage to the oil installation through aerial bombardment. When the war stopped, end of February 1991, Iraqis again rebuilt the industry with whatever available means that were available to them, because then they were under sanctions. They could not purchase any equipment. They could not import any materials. And by the end of the year 2002, and just before the 2003 war, Iraq produced at that time 2.8 million barrels per day, which has not been achieved 6 years after the occupation.